Greetings, chess friends. I have a question for everybody. Which country dominated the world of chess before the Soviet Union? Who was winning all those Olympiads and such before, of course, the Soviets won many, many in a row? The answer to that question is actually the United States of America. A bit surprising, as you don't think of all the greatest players coming from the US. A bit of a longer video here today, but I really wanted to get into some of the fun storylines going on in chess history. Again, the US team dominated the early Chess Olympiads throughout the 1930s, winning 4 consecutive team gold medals. So hopefully this is a fun topic for everyone. Enjoy! But I figured now that the real Olympics are going on, and this is also an Olympiad year for chess, that I was to do a little research. And I found the U.S. team in the 30s won 4 Olympiads in a row. Incredible dominance in a deep roster when other countries had 1 star here and 1 star there. U.S. had really 4 grandmasters, although not the top names you might think of in those days. Let's jump into the first game. And those years exactly were 1931, 33, 35, and 37. The U.S. gold medal Olympiad team in all 4 of those. Now, if you're unfamiliar, the Olympiads in chess, a very exciting event, is a 4-player match format tournament. So our best 4 from my country plays your best 4, and again, 2.5 out of those 4 games wins the match, and that essentially counts as a point or a win in the tournament. So let's jump into this game, which was one of the decisive matches from Isaac Kashdan, USA, versus legendary Grandmaster Akiba Rubinstein. Now, very difficult here when you play the Rubinstein variation against Rubinstein himself. Not always a good idea. But I want to point out that actually Kashdan, if you ask yourself who was on this Olympic team, you might think Frank Marshall. But he was there. But Kashdan really was the star. A grandmaster, a very strong player. Doesn't get mentioned as much due to a kind of short-lived career. A lot of the Americans just had to get to work and do other things. And the team even got stronger when Reshevsky joined. So let's see. Here, Kashdan with the white pieces, and really the game starts to get complicated and go downhill here. This is an absolutely wild tornado chess game, which is really fun, but Rubinstein, black, comes out on top. Now, it doesn't look too wild. What am I talking about? It looks like a boring game. We've just traded here. 2 pawns, equal, same structure. But black is a little bit ahead of schedule, let's call it. You've already castled. Black's pieces are, again, similar amount of pieces awake, but black is ahead in development just because of the castle move already being accomplished. That's a big extra move. So A3, and you have to waste another move in order to block this check. So still, white has to move the bishop and really behind schedule. This is how black gets an advantage here. Rook E8, scary move, staring at the king. Bishop E2, knight F6, and here it's probably sensing a little bit of danger creeping into the position. Kashdan goes wrong with bishop C7. I hate to see blunders or mistakes made when the correct move is so obvious. Why didn't you just castle? It's one of those moves maybe a beginner would make, whereas an experienced grandmaster, thinking maybe too deeply, let's call it, was trying to get this threat of the queen and probably was telling himself, okay, he has to move his queen, only d7, and then I'm going to play maybe knight e5, maybe then I'll castle. And all these thoughts were going through white's mind, and then bishop f5 landed. And probably all of that sinking feeling, oh, he missed this move. Not immediately deadly, we just capture and capture, but probably a move that was a bit of a surprise, I would guess. Here, finally, white does castle on move 16, and black is the first one to get to attacking. Also notice the rooks here, and white defends, and here, these 2 rooks are far superior to their counterparts with these 2 rooks. So black is, again, ahead of schedule still. That will persist move for move until things change. You'll gambit a pawn sometimes in order to get those extra moves, but in this one, black gets away with it. So let's see here, knight e4. This knight really becomes the best piece on the board. and it's defended. It's an outpost. It pressures the pawn on f2. If the queen were to move anytime, knight d2 would be possible. At the moment, also this knight is hanging. So we know white was going to move that, and then bishop f6. Again, the black pieces are better than their counterparts, and specifically, they're very, very well placed to attack this weak pawn. Both queen and bishop are there. So that pawn is a weakness. Notice the black pawn here, which is in the same spot in black's territory, is not being threatened in any way. Rook ft1, again a defensive move. Rook c4, again an aggressive move. Queen f3, rook back to c8. That move doesn't inspire, but actually black turns a little bit to defensive mode. King f8. And you might be thinking, wow, king f8, this seemed like a good game for black. But black is waiting for the opportunity to take here. Notice there's pressure on this bishop. And all the while, this f2 pawn is tender. The knight is hitting it, but nothing else at the moment. So keep an eye on that one. Bishop f3, g6, forcing the knight away. And when that knight moves, now this d4 pawn gets captured. Here, the real complications begin. It's move 25. It feels almost earlier than that. Remember how boring the game looked around this time, move 13. So here we go. Bishop takes d4. Knight takes d5. Again, chess gets very complicated when there's counterattacks happening left and right. You attack my queen. I'll make check on your king. And it's a real battle. Notice the queen is backing that up. Also the knight. Notice this knight is under attack twice, hanging. The rook wouldn't even be able to move because then this rook would be hanging. It's a complete tornado here. King f1, not wanting to walk into the corner. Queen b5 check. Bishop blocks that check. And then queen c6. We needed to get out of the way of knight threatening our queen. But this was a nice inclusion. By playing the check and forcing the bishop to block, notice there's no other king moves here. You have to block. And then moving our queen, we kind of reduce the danger this knight was under attack by that bishop. So bishop a7, the best engine move. All the way out of there. Remember, the bishop can still just snipe back through the king side. Knight f2 is threatened. And this king is really feeling the breeze. There's no cover. Queen f4, king g7, a safety type move, guarding the pawn. Rook c1, queen e6, bishop g4, threatening our queen. And here, a sensational moment. Rook takes c1. Our queen is hanging, and it gets taken. And we take a second rook. Usually, good rule of thumb, 2 rooks are better than a queen. Again, you'll have to calculate. Every situation is unique, but 2 rooks are usually a slight favorite versus a queen. What makes this one so special is that if the king were to go elsewhere, we can just take this bishop as well, an extra piece, 2 rooks and an extra bishop we would have there. The king moves and we make this extra check, and here white resigns. Again, if you move your king, rook takes e6, black will be completely safe. No danger on the black king, and we have 2 rooks and a bishop and a pawn for the queen. Way, way, way too much to handle. Otherwise, the variation with queen takes that rook is very simple when the dust settles here. Let's just say king takes and pawn or rook takes this bishop. We're just up a rook and an extra pawn. Far too much, and black wins. Wow, Rubinstein and Poland defeat the top board, and this looks in trouble. The first of this Olympic run of 4 in a row was very, very close. And the team standings, it all came down to an endgame from a player that some Americans may know, I.A. Horowitz. You might have heard of that name as he wrote over 20 chess books. I.A. Horowitz really was a strong player and a real anchor on these Olympic teams. Here he plays captures the knight in a very important and crucial decision to go into a king and pawn endgame. But he was banking correctly on his d-pawn being a protected passer, and our king is faster to the action. Every move from here on out is played perfectly by white, and that starts with a great move here, g4. g4, a preventative, prophylactic move. And if it weren't for f6, for example, king d7 or king e7, actually g5 would put an absolute hammerlock on this king side. White would be winning. So he didn't allow that, but g4 was a nice inclusion. f6 to stop that threat. h4 trying to do it again. h5. And the king side here gets really clarified, let's call it. This pawn, it does eventually move, but it has obvious problems. It's going to get taken. And white is faster to the king side. Remember, this is the same match as we just saw. The 4 top Americans were playing the top Polish players. I.A. Horowitz was able to win this one, saving that match. King c7, king b5. And again, here is the problem. A move like king b7, keeping everything defended, really just runs into d6. And protected pass pawns are like gold in the endgame. Protected passer, that's just a winning advantage. And here white is winning. So instead of that, black in the real game went for king d6, allowing king takes pawn, and then f5. A good try. And actually, this game really was a struggle. I want you to picture the other players already done, the Americans needing a win. Think of all the players watching. The Americans need a win here with white, and the Polish team needs only a draw. Team chess is really dramatic. e4. No one knows which move is coming. The entire match, the entire Olympiad really hinged on this match and this game. f6, a sensational move. And in fact, these two pass pawns make enough of a distraction for the king that this pawn isn't able to go. So e3, it looks like a race, but after f7, we would be queening with check. King is forced to go to e7. You can't push your pawn anymore. d6, check. King takes pawn, d7. All those pawn moves were made without black getting a single step in. He does play e2 here, and we queen. Of course, notice if king e7, it would have been met by king c7. Black would be then pushing their pawn, and we're queening with check and just winning. So e2 is the best move. Queen and queen. An absolute war here. And one thing I want to remind everyone that this often happens. You have an epic endgame, and then you queen, I queen, and all of a sudden we have kind of a reset and a new endgame. But this one is much more clear that white is winning. We're already a pawn ahead. It's our turn to make the first check here. And what a move. This threatens everything that black has. Check both pawns. He collects this one. Notice any real danger, we're going to be able to collect that one. And again, the Polish player puts up a bit of a fight, and then not sure if there was any time pressure situation here, but he does resign eventually here after queen d8. The American team saved this game for a 2-2 draw and actually won the Chess Olympics because of this. Let's move along. The next Olympiad, 1933, was really one, again, Kashdan carries the team. This was a nice game I found during a 4-0 sweep of the team from Lithuania. So a Petrov defense. Interesting that, again, the Soviet and Russian teams at the time were not playing in these Olympiads. It was the Depression in the United States and worldwide, and so very interesting time. Perhaps maybe there were many strong players again, but no deep teams. After the Second World War, again, the Soviets won a number of Olympiads, one after the other. Absolute dominance for some 50 years. So knight b5, going for an early threat here, knight c7. Again, looks like kind of beginner chess, but remember, Kashdan was an experienced grandmaster. Here, king d8 and getting castled. Even though the queens are gone, this king is in an awkward spot and not comfortable, but not maybe immediately getting checkmated. a6, knight d4, knight takes, c5, knight f3, bishop e6. Looks like a pretty close game. And actually here, white does take a while in order to be able to win this one, but it is a nice end game tactic. This game I would put in the category of queenless middle game. This is a queenless middle game. I wouldn't say we're in the end game even just yet. c4, keeping a nice organized pawn structure. Of course, if black takes, we'll take back, but this pawn will be an isolated pawn, a weakness. If we get to play d5 ourselves, that would be a great accomplishment. So black strikes immediately in the center. D takes c5, bishop takes, and a nice sequence here, b4, and c5. Really, not only cementing a nice pass pawn here, the majority 3 versus only 2. Again, think long term. I know there's rooks in the way. I know there's a bishop and a king there, but long term, those pawns are still going to be there down the road, and one of these 3 is going to beat the other 2. That's an advantage right there. In addition, our knight has some nice squares, and all of that, really this bishop kind of looking like that big pawn situation where it's stuck in between everything. Not a great position, and white is slowly improving. Knight d4, great central move. Rook a c1. Bishop c3. We're okay to make some trades here. Knight e4. Black does a good job regrouping. These are some aggressively placed pieces, but an exciting turn of events here. After g3 and f3, Black really complicates matters by playing a takes b4. Our knight is totally hanging Black's. Again, Black is the player from Lithuania. White is a Grandmaster American top board Kashdan. Knight takes e6. Let's really take an understanding of this whole situation. There's a knight hanging, and instead he takes a pawn. Why? Well, we could also take this knight, and then, let's see. I'm not sure the next move here. Perhaps rook takes. Looks like rook takes is the preferred move here. And essentially, Black is going to get a ton of pawns for this. Notice Black getting 1 pawn, potentially losing the knight. They would get a 2nd pawn. This pawn would be hanging here after they've taken. Instead, it goes slightly different. White flips the script, sort of. Knight takes bishop. Actually, a great move. And there followed here rook takes, pawn takes, rook takes, bishop takes. And this knight, which isn't quite trapped, but he plays a very good move here. Notice if we retreat, they are getting a whole bunch of pawns for this. Again, captures. This one likely to fall, and we have 3 extra pawns. Black does for the knight. Interesting position. But instead, white, again, flips the script. A creative move here. E takes d5. Kind of forcing you to take my knight. Go ahead. You can have it. He does. And then, I think we'd all play this move. d6. A nice forcing variation. All of a sudden, we have 2 pawns, especially this d6 pawn is very, very close to the finish line, and a rook infiltrating, and the bishop. And this is a deadly attack. King e8, actually the best move, but there's just no escape here. Check. Check. And I want to point out a critical variation. He moves the king away. You might say, well, what's going on here? Why didn't he just take this? Rook c7. That would end the game. The king is in check and the rook under attack if he were to capture. This pawn is just promoting. There's no stopping that on the next move. So, wow, wait a minute. So this pawn, bishop, rook combo just can't be stopped. This is just a runaway train here. Again, he doesn't want to take that pawn. c6, and Black resigns. That one turned quickly. A bit of a complicated game, a bit of a flurry there. But after the wonderful move here, e takes d5. I just love that move. Really kind of a picture here of simplicity you have to take back. It's so nice in chess when you know your opponent's moves. You have to take back. And then we get our next move in is a threat check. And we're off to the races after check, 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 check. And then just push the pawn. Those 2 pawns are worth probably another rook. So, wow. White wins that one in a comfortable victory in that match and that Olympiad. Let's keep moving here. And maybe the finest game of today was played by none other than Reuben Fine. An interesting character, again, a brilliant man, and one of the strong chess masters, grandmasters, and authors of that time. Here playing the British player c takes d5, e takes d5, e3, bishop e7, bishop d3. A popular opening still today. Not as much dynamic play just yet, but standard development, I would say. This one is easy to play. Okay, now we have a little bit of something happening. Knight captures in the center, a nice, well-placed piece. This knight is under attack. He just jumps back. So this knight has made 3 moves, although it looks like 1. And then f4. I love this nice stone wall structure. And I suggest you kind of get used to that. If you like attacking, it's a good formation. The bishop flows right in between all the pawns. Good vision. Our queen and rook can all join in eventually. This is a great attacking situation already. The seeds for a nice attack are already being planted. Maybe black sensed that and played c5 here. A bit of a nervous move instead of just developing our bishop. King h1, safety first, queen b6, and here the advantage and the complications really start to lean in white's favor. Knight a4. A nice move hitting the queen and the pawn. We capture with the pawn, and I think already black was at a loss for what to do. Wouldn't be too crazy just to take this, but maybe he wanted to preserve the bishop pair. Bishop d7, I guess that doesn't preserve that bishop pair, but captures, and again a nice counter here by Fine. We can't save this pawn. It's attacked 3 times, only defended once. So he plays bishop c2. Therefore, when the knight takes, we're not really threatening anything. And knight back to c3. Putting the pressure back on black that the d5 pawn is a target. Bishop f6, knight d5. I love this knight here, the best piece on the board. And black really starts getting greedy, grabbing this b pawn. We get to develop another piece. He has to move again. Queen e2 is an excellent move. It looks so innocent, but actually queen c4 is a serious threat, and rook b5. So the danger is real here, and black's pieces here are a bit clumsy as they're not able to coordinate well. Look at the white king. What are these pieces attacking? The white king is just perfectly safe. So very interesting, material equal here. a6, that prevents any rook b5 danger, but not a fun move to play. Rook c1, bishop d2, again, signs of the bishop c7 move we saw earlier from Kashdan. Don't like that move. It's deep in our territory, but just another waste. Here, bishop c3. All of the white pieces are very active. Look at the white pieces. Every single one of them is highly, highly active, focused on the king or the bishop, open files. There's a check. It's a dangerous position here. Immediate threat. This bishop is hanging. He plays bishop f6, and the game really ends essentially here. The strategic game is won right here. Knight takes and pawn takes. Now, there's still a few more moves in the game, but again, the strategic battle has been won. As soon as you damage the other team's pawns like this, not only probably this one could end in an attack because the king is so open, but almost all endgames are going to be in our favor. Rook endgames, the pawns are very, very easy targets. Rook d6. Danger, danger with attacking on his mind. Knight e6, and Fine wastes no time. Rook takes knight, sacrificing. It's really this bishop which has a perfect line of sight into the castle. Here, queen takes, and he doesn't want to block with the rook. Again, that's a light square, so a move like bishop to b3 or bishop g6 would be winning more material. And here, let's see, he plays instead king h8. Really nice move, precise. Queen h3 hits the pawn. Notice we want to get on these light squares, but don't go to f5 as the black queen is watching. King g7, queen g4, and queen g6, black resigns. That's a really nice game, I felt like. Smooth and easy to understand. So Reuben Fine, again, one of the real anchors of the team. And this team, after 3 Olympiads, only got stronger when they added Reshevsky to the team. So, wow. And this one, already, we're going to jump into the middle of his epic battle with Tartakower. Again, one of the games that really decided this Olympiad. Here, knight is attacking the queen. Also, this pawn is hanging. You can tell the black king is not comfortable in a little bit of a sidestep already. Knight h7 check. And Tartakower really goes overboard. With his queen hanging, he decides to just sacrifice this knight and play for check. Now, of course, we can retreat our knight, block that check all in one move, and then h5. He was going for this, sacrificed a knight, but he said, I'm going to make a check, and then I'm going to threaten your knight. But in this game, Reshevsky really showed his positional class, and that wasn't common just yet. Again, that Soviet school really added so much to the technique of chess, but this was already the 37. Really, those top players weren't on the scene just yet. world champion this year again was Alekhine. Queen f5. That brings our queen to the rescue of the king in the castle, guards the knight. Capture, capture. But here, an important point, very important, is that you cannot take this pawn. Taking that pawn would run into queen f1 and checkmate in a moment. So the back rank has a weakness. He plays rook f2, trying to disrupt that queen. Otherwise, we remain black 2 pawns ahead. Here, queen c3, threatening this pawn. It feels like white has activity, but black, again, 2 pawns ahead. Come on, just trade with me. He goes here, rook f6, queen c3, bc3, king g7. You have to move. And again, the strategic battle has been won. In other words, the dust is settled. Black is winning. We have an extra pawn here, plus the damaged structure. And what does that really mean? What does that amount to? Well, where is white going to create a pass pawn from? There's no chance. Meanwhile, these pawns are hard to guard. They're going to get taken. Whereas black creating a pass pawn, it's certainly here, 2 versus 1. We might even pick up some free material on the way. So huge advantage to black here, an easy technical win for any chess player. Rook f8, and you should really believe in yourself that you could win this game against a strong player with black. And if you don't think so, maybe put it in your engine and try to practice. This should be an automatic win with the black pieces. I'm not going to really elaborate too much more, but it's easy to understand that black should win this game, and he eventually did. So Reshevsky increasing the strength 4 Olympiads in a row that the U.S. team won. There was, of course, the monumental Olympiad where many chess masters stayed in Argentina. That was the next one after these 4. And then they stopped doing the Olympiads during the Second World War for maybe a dozen years. So really interesting kind of first phase of chess Olympiads throughout the 30s, dominated by the Americans. Really fun. Hope everyone enjoyed. And tell me your picks for the upcoming 2024 Olympiad. I'd love to hear that. Thanks again.